Hello and welcome to another episode of Fractional Impact. Today we're speaking to Ed Pypker, a seasoned HR and labour relations leader with more than 35 years of experience in manufacturing, automation, engineering, food processing, and unionised environments. We'll cover how to approach HR strategy in technical and unionised businesses, what leaders misunderstand about engagement and morale, and lessons from delivering HRIS programs across multiple countries. Ed, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, good day, Stuart and Gianna. My name's Ed Pypker. I've been in human resources and labor relations for over 35 years and in a variety of different industries, both here in Canada, the US, but also globally in Europe and Asia. And last 2 to 3 years have transitioned to doing more consulting away from full-time HR executive work, and just as an opportunity to round out my career and to really offer that experience that I've had over the years to a larger variety of clients on a more fractional and limited basis, but really offering that experience in a way that meets the needs of clients who may not be able to employ full-time, but who are still looking at that high level input around HR and people issues.
Yeah, awesome. I'm excited to get into that. We're joined as well by Gianna Maliari. If you'd like to introduce yourself, Gianna.
Yeah, thanks, Ed, for that. I'm Gianna, of course, and I'm part of the fractional clients team, helping out with things sales and all things client delivery as well.
Fantastic. So, Ed, you were saying there that it's just been recently, maybe over the last couple of years or so, that you've transitioned into more of the consulting, fractional type work. What got you to that point? Like, tell us about the experience and the knowledge build up that got you there.
It's it's always an interesting thing, Stuart, when you look at your career, and especially towards the end of your career. What are ways in which I can offer the experience that I have, the knowledge that I've gained over the years, in a way that really benefits organizations, but also, to be honest, provide some more flexibility for myself at this stage in my career, right? Where I can pay attention to other things that are important, giving back to the community, family, and perhaps some adventure, but also looking at doing things around HR and leadership in a way that impacts different groups at different times, keeps the variety there, and keeps the impact at that high level, but also allows some flexibility.
Yeah. So to kind of set the stage, what is the type of company or types of companies you're working with and the bottlenecks they may have, and what is the value add that you bring when you go into a company?
Yeah, right now I've got a number of clients that are, I would say, in the smaller range, where they're looking at that more strategic HR involvement, but are not able to, don't have the resources to fund someone on a full-time basis. So I've been working with some small automation companies, some small manufacturing companies, some who are non-union, some that are unionized, but I'm able to offer the experience that I have, but in a more limited way. So I would say this would be, anywhere from 25 to 200, 300 employees, and they are in the engineering, automation, and or manufacturing space at this point.
Yeah. Interesting. You're saying there that some of the clients you work with have unionized situations and some aren't. What are the key differences in working with unionized versus non-unionized?
The key difference is really understanding the technical aspects of what it takes to work with a unionized workforce. So the legal implications, the dynamics of a collective agreement. But I would say also working with a company that is unionized in an employee group in such a way that the relationship is built in a more even though it's a very legal basis in terms of the collective agreement, how do you get through that, cut through that, and still build relationship with the union leaders, with the employees, in such a way that it's not a legalistic only relationship, but one in which the employees feel heard, the union feels that they're part of the process, but at the same time, the management leadership team is still able to clearly drive the agenda that's required. So it's that balancing between the more structured aspects of the relationship, but then keeping it organic, keeping it real in terms of the relationship, so that you're able to move in the direction that you need to move without the opposition. Often unions oppose because they're not involved. They dig in when they feel their rights are being overridden, right? And they feel that their input's not there. So it's a matter of pulling in, engaging with the union leadership, as well as the regular rank and file union members, in such a way that they say, okay, this company's going somewhere. They've got plans. How can we help them get there, rather than how can we be an impediment to where they need to go?
Interesting. I know that a lot of the companies you'll be working with will either be going through different growth stages or will be hoping to grow in the near future. What early signs tell you that a company's HR structure and system isn't keeping up with, or isn't going to keep up with, its growth?
Yeah, it's when you walk into a company, or I begin to engage with a company, and the HR function is very largely transactional. In other words, it's doing the necessary hiring and perhaps letting go and administering the benefits and looking after some more routine employee issues. But the HR team and the leadership is not engaged from a strategic looking forward aspect of the company, in terms of, all right, do we have the right people in the right roles? Do we have the right culture? Are we aligning the business needs with the people needs? Right? Is the team functioning in such a way, right, that the employees are being developed, that leaders are not only managing the business, but also leading where the company needs to go, using the people in a positive and productive way, right, which brings out the best in each of the individuals. So really, like I said, that transactional, getting the day-to-day stuff done versus strategic leadership, culture development.
Yeah. And what's kind of the reasoning for a company to bring in that strategic element? Because if I'm a founder of a manufacturing or an engineering company, and I'm thinking, you know what, HR is fine. Like, we hire someone when we need to, everything ticks along as it needs to. When something's broken, we fix it. Why would I spend more money on strategic HR when I can put that money into sales or marketing?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, often it is, Stuart, when a company runs up against a certain roadblock. It could be something, and I'm working with a company right now who over a couple of years have seen reduced revenue. right? And that creates all kinds of challenges, right? And they've now brought me in, looked at their org structure, looked at their approach to the front end of the business in this situation. And we've worked out a strategy where we're aligning those resources, bringing on some new people who are to fill some of the gaps that are there. Right. So it's often they run up against a roadblock. It could be, like I said, diminished revenue or decreasing revenue, or other constraints to growth where a certain structure worked for, let's say up until 10 million, 15 million annual turnover, but then they can't seem to get to that next phase. And very often, it is an org structure. It is a people alignment restraint, right? So that's often the point that I get brought in to say, okay, let's look at, and fresh eyes coming in, looking at, okay, who's in place, and really working with the leadership team at that point in terms of helping them understand, providing a little bit of that mirror so they can see for themselves. Often they have an inclination, right? And it's that outside affirmation, or bringing someone like myself in to help hold that mirror up, but then to also point out some things that I've seen and been involved in the past to help them move beyond that particular roadblock they may be having at that time.
In these fast-growing companies, are there any particular sort of HR processes that should exist before they become a problem? And they usually don't.
Sorry, could you say that again, Gianna?
So in fast-growing companies, what sort of HR processes should exist before they become a problem? Are you finding that there are certain things that don't usually exist at a certain point, but they should?
Yeah, so so one of the things that I would say, is some type of a more formalized employee review process, right? Something whereby there is feedback. And I know performance review and annual performance reviews may not have, not always seem or sound like the most interesting thing, but it's really the full package around that. So it is that aspect of goal setting, looking forward, communication with the employees about where the company is going to be going and how the individual employee can help contribute to that, and then measurements along the way. So some of those structures really where there's clarity, right, where the employee is sure about where the company is going and how they fit into it. It is then providing the support for that employee to grow and to help not only fulfill, the company's goals and objectives, that department's goals and objectives, but their individual goals and objectives, so that they can feel and sense that growth and development as well, right? So I would say, in a nutshell, it's that growth and development piece, which is really can flow out of a bit more of a formalized performance review, and really goal setting and development and growth, but in such a way that there's some structure to it. Most people and most leaders say, yeah, that's a good thing, but they get so busy in the day-to-day, right, that it doesn't happen. And then particularly your high performing employees, your high potential employees, right, feel perhaps taken for granted, feel that they're not, there's not clarity around where they can grow, and they may begin to look elsewhere.
Yeah.
For the leaders in a company that you might be working with, where they have a team behind them and they're very technically strong, they're very good at what they do, but they're not used to actually leading people, how do you help coach them to manage their team better?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question, because I've worked with a number of very engineering and technical companies, and there's an exercise I've done in some leadership training courses that I've taught. And I start with asking the, say, 10, 15, 20 employees in the room. I say, think of a leader, either currently or in the past, who brought out the best in you and your team. Someone that you really enjoyed working for, right? So then they think of that individual. And then I say, okay, now think of that characteristic, that key trait that caused you to pick this individual. What was it about the way she managed, right, that made you think of her when I suggested a certain person? They say, okay, great. So then I said, write that down on a yellow sticky note. And they do. And then I put on the board three boxes. One that says IQ, one that says TQ, your technical quotient, and then the third box, which is EQ. And take that yellow sticky note and put it, that characteristic. Is it because they're really smart? Is it because this leader, she was very technically competent and good at the technical aspects, which is often where people get promoted in an engineering company? Or was it because of their emotional quotient, their ability to relate well and lead people well, right, around the, let's say, the soft skills? 90% of yellow sticky notes, when I do this exercise, fall in the EQ section. And I've done this, that little exercise in Canada, the US, the UK, Germany. Even my Southern German engineering colleagues put it in the EQ quotient. What does that tell you? These engineers who have their engineering degrees, they got into engineering school because they're intelligent. They have high IQ. They progressed in the company because they're technically competent. They demonstrated that they were able to perform well at the functions. And yet, 90% of these people in these leadership positions tell the rest of their colleagues that what mattered most was how well they dealt with their soft skills, with their EQ, right? The intangibles. How did they build trust? How well were they at communicating? How well were they at discerning the different employees and putting them in developing them, encouraging them in terms of their function and their roles? How well were they at dealing with conflict? And, this, and then that, then I launch into some training around these items. And so it's an example of where most people most leaders in a technical environment, right? They recognize the soft skills are important, but they really, in fairness to them, they've had very little or no training around those things. Often at the end of it, I then will say to these leaders, we've done 2-3 hours of training. We've had a really good time, a lot of learning. And then I will say, okay, in conclusion, as you go from here, and remember, when you're working with your team, if one of your team members 10, 15, 20 years down the road isn't taking the same course, will they think of you when asked this question? And sometimes the response is, oh, Ed, you're making it very personal. I go, yes, leadership is that. Right. And but it's just one of the examples or one of the ways in which I've tried to infuse that EQ portion, the soft skills, which they themselves recognize as that key ingredient in terms of effective leadership.
So you obviously understand the importance of relationship building and soft skills and leadership, but how do you help leaders move from sort of compliance by the book driven HR to relationship driven leadership?
There's a phrase I'd often use in some of my leadership training, and I would say one of your most powerful tools that you can use in terms of building relationship, enhancing your communication, is what I call the power of the question, right? So I encourage them to hone their question asking abilities, right? And asking questions are powerful. If you have a leader that comes to you and he asks just even routine questions, right? It suggests interests. It suggests that the employee has something to contribute. It suggests an openness. Sometimes as leaders, we think communication is only about effectively giving information one way, right? But really it is, yes, disseminating information is important, but really drawing out of our employee groups, out of our teams, information that we need to make better decisions, to work more effectively, to understand possible solutions to complex problems. Often the answer is there, but we're not asking the questions. We're not engaging in an effective way. And that's really where relationship is built on two-way, right? It's both, yes, giving information, what's needed, but it's also, and I would say for leaders, as important to take the time and the effort and to set the climate in which information is coming to you as well.
Yeah, I can definitely agree with the question asking thing. Like if I think about the best, mentors or coaches that I've had over my time, so much of their value to me wasn't so much the answers to the questions that I had, but the questions that they actually delivered to me that brought out the best and the most productive answers. So I think that's so true. How much of your job is actually doing the people management side of things, where you're coaching, you're training, versus thinking about the future of the company and thinking, in 12 months' time, if we want to hit these aggressive goals, we need to hire this person, we need to hire that person? Like, how much of your time goes towards each side of the work, if that makes sense?
Yeah, that's a great question, and that's going to depend both at the time in terms of perhaps the calendar year and where the company's at in some of those regular cycles. It's going to depend on the relative size of the business. A larger company, of course, the more senior the executive, the more time, the longer the horizon is looking forward. Right. Smaller companies, and by smaller, I mean, less than perhaps 1,000 employees. Right. It's more the leadership team, the top executives need to be both shorter term in terms of some of the day-to-day things, but then also need to take the time to do the longer term strategic work. Right. And again, this is where someone like myself can really help set some of that rhythm, set some of the time aside to do the longer term strategic planning, which will really has the potential not only to allow the organization to expand and to grow and to develop in areas that it was perhaps not paying attention to, but it also allows it to build in efficiencies. It allows it to take the time to say, okay, how can I reduce some of the costs? What am I doing that is not the most cost effective, right? But it's always been the way that we've been doing it, right? And sometimes some fresh eyes from a consultant can help in terms of identify some of those areas and engage with the organization to allow them to really do some of that longer term strategic planning as well.
Yeah, that's cool. One of the things that you probably help companies with is increasing the retention of some of their best talent.
Mm-hmm.
what are the things you usually look at first or try to do maybe within the first 3 months of working with a new company to help them retain their top talent?
It's it's increasingly a challenge, especially for more technical company. There's demand, and I've said throughout the years, I said in the end, people vote with their feet. So retention and a good retention strategy is really important. So the first thing is gather the data. You could have a high employee turnover, a higher than you'd like employee turnover, right? But if you've got 500 to 1,000 employees, right? Is it a certain age bracket? Is it a certain division in your overall organization? Is it a certain job classification? Right. So really, not only looking at the high level numbers, but break those down, understand, right, the demographics, understand the perhaps the motivation behind this, right? Begin to ask some questions, right? And then develop a strategy to begin to counter those. But really that first step is understand the data, dive deeper, right? Is it employees that have been there for 3 to 4 years and then lose interest, right? Your focus then is going to be more on employee development, right? How to, perhaps they don't see any career path, or it's not communicated effectively to them. So they just begin to lose interest, especially your higher potential employees. Is it in the first year of employment, all right? Perhaps we need to jointly examine the hiring process, the criteria, how we're marketing to the broader market in terms of who we're attracting. Are we asking the right questions? Right. So it's especially in retention, it is understanding the information. Often, or what I've seen in the past, is employers panicking a little bit about higher retention and beginning to, or start to throw some money at certain things. Oh, we need to put in place a better benefit plan, or we need to have more pizza parties, or we may need to do, and they may be helpful, but if you don't really understand the motivation and what's causing, so this is where I said, Stuart, really the key thing is do a deeper dive in terms of the data, understand the data, and then ask questions. Understand and take the time. And again, this is something that I've done, in my previous full-time position, a lot of time driving down the employee turnover rates. And boy, there are real hard numbers on that. And because some of the solutions that me and my team came up with in terms of responding to higher turnover in certain divisions and certain locations, yes, they cost some money. Often they didn't cost a lot, but the return was huge. The return was huge, just not only in terms of immediate dollars, but retaining and then attracting top talent, right? Knows where to go in terms of employee locations or groups, right? Where people are staying and where people are excited, where there's a buzz in the workplace. Your top talent wants to join that, right? So again, it's when you improve employee turnover rates, right, and increase your retention, it's not only benefiting those who stay, but it's creating a workplace that others want to join as well. So you end up getting that positive momentum, if you will, in a couple of ways.
I completely understand where you're getting there, because I remember working in previous corporate roles, and even though I probably wasn't the most happiest in those roles, it was always the benefits package that kept me there. maybe with the free dinners, the snacks, the goodie bags, whatever it was. But do you have an example of maybe a small HR change or a small just change that has perhaps had a positive impact on culture and employee retention?
Yeah, I would say, there's a couple. One of them would be paying more attention, and this was in a larger company, but paying more attention to career path, right? And having the conversation about where the individual employee wants to go and how that aligns with the company's objectives as well. All right. So really that interest in the employee, asking the questions about where they want to go, where they'd like to grow, what positions they may be interested in. I've had it where, sometimes they, we in a company I was in, we're, who are we gonna put into this position? We don't know. All right. And, we kind of scratch our heads, and then we start asking our employee group through some of the annual development programs and the like. And we found out that, this particular employee, she's always really been interested in program management. Right. And she was in electrical engineering. We didn't know that. Right. But by asking the question and engaging and drawing out from our employees, right, where they wanted to go, we could then begin to move and develop, provide some additional courses to support that, and allow people to move into those types of positions. So I would say, that's just one example where a proactive engagement, right, brought out, and that employee stayed because now she said, I can move into something else. I can grow, I can develop. And from there, she was able to springboard into other positions as well.
When you're working with individuals to figure out, what their goals are career-wise and where they want to go, with the idea of helping them achieve that, I can 100% see how that would develop the relationship that they have to the company. But isn't there also a risk with that, where maybe a lot of the time their career plans are going to be outside of the company they're working at right now? Are you maybe not just helping them leave quicker, or is that something you just have to accept?
I mean, that is always a possibility, right? But I would say that top talent is already doing that, right? So it's rarely that I've seen someone who has a lot of potential, right? Where he's not aware of that, right? And by engaging with them, it's not like we've suddenly awoken this latent desire to really grow and develop in their career. It may be possible, but I would say more times than not, significantly more times than not, it's the opposite, where, okay, my manager now really does have an interest in where I'm going. My manager is willing to engage and to listen and to help me grow and develop. It may be at some point, right, that their potential outgrows what you're able to deliver, but at least then it's a positive two-way conversation where they still feel engaged.
Yeah.
And developing talent within, all right, sends not only a message to that individual employee, but it sends a message to the rest of the team as well, right? If the other 100 employees in that particular location see that Joe, right, who started as a single contributor role and can see their career path, that gives them a signal. Okay, wow, there's potential here. There's potential, because if he could do that, perhaps I can. right? So again, you get this momentum, you get this flywheel moving forward, right, which ends up driving additional engagement, additional retention, attraction, simply because it sets that culture.
Yeah, that makes sense. One of the cool things you've done is you've built an entire HR playbook for mergers and acquisitions. What elements do you find matter the most during due diligence and integration?
Yeah, it's a M&A was a very interesting and exciting part of my career and some of the work that I've done, because it really gave you a very focused window in terms of a particular organization. And I had the privilege of looking at being part of the M&A team and looking at acquisitions not only in Asia or in Europe, but in the U.S., Canada. So it's a lot of different cultures. So it was a lot of fun. Really, the one of the things that, and particularly from an HR perspective, often a acquisition due diligence process, and it needs to, pays attention to the finances, right, to the operations, to the nuts and bolts, if you will, of the organization. But when you look at the literature, most acquisitions either fail or are successful, not on those hard numbers, but on the people culture issues, on the integration afterwards, on what is the essence of the company and how does that going to mesh with the acquiring company. Right. So one of the first things that, and the thing that I focused on was exactly that, the people culture. What's it like? Right. And what is the leadership team like? There's companies that I've been part of in terms of the due diligence process where great company, great product, but the real talent and knowledge resided in one or two individuals at the top, often the founder or entrepreneur. And they hadn't really been able to develop, grow, and promote people at that next layer in terms of the leadership, right? And that was sometimes a red flag, sometimes a yellow flag, in the sense that, wow, okay, if that talent leaves 2, 3, 4, 5 years afterwards, then where's the organization? What have they been able to do in terms of driving and promoting knowledge further down, right? What's that culture like? And especially on a more technical company, right? That needs to percolate down through the organization in such a way that it's not just at the top. So that, I would say, what's the culture and what is the leadership style like, and how's that going to mesh, with the organization, that's being acquired. Then I look at retention issues, right? If you're looking at purchasing a company and they got high turnover, boy, that's a red flag, right? What are they doing in terms of what's the culture? Why are people leaving, right? Flip side, if nobody leaves, right, may also be a bit of a yellow flag. Maybe they're paying way too much. Maybe they're doing things, right, that so it's that healthy understanding, and that's going to vary by industry, but understanding what that looks like. I would say then the third thing that is essential on any M&A situation, and particularly on the due diligence, is the communication. I've been involved in acquiring companies that have had over, say, 10, 15 years, gone through several acquisitions. What really warmed my heart was when we met with those individuals and spent time, right, not only giving them the information about where we're going, but then sitting in the lunchroom, taking time to make ourselves available because they've got a lot of questions, right? And so really that communication engagement phase, the saying is you only have one chance to make a first impression, right? And when you're coming in, right, it's really important, in my view, in that first week to take that time to have a plan, right? Have information, be available, right? Emails don't do it, right? People want to sit down with you. They want to look you in the eye and ask you questions. And that's something I think we've been able to do. I've been able to lead quite effectively, is that post-merger integration as well, in which people feel comfortable, or at least more comfortable, because they have a lot of questions. Right? They have a lot of concerns. There's, am I going to get laid off? Are we going to be downsized? What is the plan? And taking that time and having a clear communication strategy is essential.
Yeah, that's interesting. With some of the companies you've worked with, especially in spaces like food or manufacturing or engineering, there can be a bit of a divide, a bit of a gap between the sort of executive level side of things and then the day-to-day shop floor side of the business. How do you help connect those two halves?
It's relatively easy in the sense of, but it's not necessarily easy to do. And that is to take the time. I know of an exec years ago. He moved into, it was a large manufacturing company in Canada. And one of the first things he did was put his office right in the middle of the shop floor.
Wow.
Right. And made himself available. Right. So, we've all heard the expression, I have an open door policy. Right. Well, I've never heard an executive or leader say I've got a closed door policy. But you and I both know that there's a wide variety in terms of who actually is open. Right. And this was an example of a leader who very tangibly did something. Right. And in the course of several years, he was able to significantly turn around a very poor labor relations climate, right, with a highly unionized and a very aggressive union into a much better working relationship. And it just started by being available.
Yeah.
One of the things I would ask a general manager of a plant, that say, he had 200-300 employees, I would say, how often do you do a walkabout on the shop floor? And if they say once a month, twice a month, boy, I get worried, right? All right. And it's because they should really, the effective leaders are there daily.
Yeah.
Right. And it may just be a 5-10 minute walkabout, right? And it may just be asking questions about the football game the night before, about the snowstorm or whatever that may happen, but they are visible, they are present, they are engaged, and they are interested. And, so that begins to knock down some of those barriers.
Yeah, I've read 400 or 500 pages of the Elon Musk biography.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the most interesting things I found from reading that is that his time with like Tesla and SpaceX and stuff like that, the amount of time he spends just walking around the shop floor, asking everyone, what are they doing?
Yeah.
Why are they doing it that way? Why aren't they doing it a different way? All hours of the day, sleeping there, getting up and doing it again the next day. And you can see how that kind of impact or that kind of way of doing things moves progress forward so much quicker than when you don't have that kind of involvement. So I can totally get how that is so effective.
And here's the interesting thing, Stuart. If you're able to engage and ask the questions on the small things, like
Yeah.
the football game last night or whatever it may be, right? And then you begin to have some relationship. In my career, I've done a lot of union negotiations, never had a work stoppage. And not that we didn't get close, right? There were some very difficult contract negotiations that I've had over the years. But one of the things I really focused on when we were not in collective bargaining was regularly meeting and discussing issues. They could be small items, right? Like, do we want Pepsi or Coke in the cafeteria? Right? Yeah. Should the work schedule be changed a little bit? Is the parking lot adequate for our employees? Right. And if you develop a track record of being able to sort through some of the smaller items, when you get to the tough stuff, because face it, contract negotiations, increases, pensions, job security, they're not easy.
Yeah.
Right. But if you have a track record, it becomes easier to have to build on that when it gets tough. I know there was a large public post office. This was here in Canada, right? And they've had a notoriously poor labor relations climate over the years, and they've had on and off strikes in the last year or two again. But I remember one round of negotiation years ago, and for this organization, there were not hundreds, but there were literally thousands of outstanding grievances, right, going into contract negotiations.
Yeah.
If you can't resolve more routine grievances, how in the world are you expected to cut through major contract issues, right? So that was it. The other end of the spectrum in terms of bad relations, not able to solve things, moving into contract negotiations. Whereas if you have that track record of listening, understanding, coming up with small agreements on minor things, you set yourself up for success. And that's part of what relationship building is. But it takes time, it takes effort, and it can sometimes be concrete things like putting your office right in the shop floor.
Yeah, it shows you as well the value of just building that standard rapport with people as well. Yeah. Like for me, when I think of building rapport, I think of it on a sales basis, you know? And I think it's easy to forget about the impacts of building rapport with vendors, with employees, with clients, with anyone effectively. Because, when times do get tough, which they inevitably do sometimes, you really see the value of that. So I think that's a great point. Gianna, any closing questions or comments?
No, not that I can think of. Thank you, Ed. That was very insightful.
Thank you.
What is the best way for someone to get in touch with you, get on a meeting with you, and absorb some of this knowledge?
Yeah, so the best way would be just to visit my website at insideedge.ca, insideedgeconsulting.ca, and you'll have there's a fair bit of information about some of the things I've done and what I'm doing and how I can help. There's also an email address there, which is simply ed@insideedgeconsulting.ca. And there's a calendar in there as well. And if you'd like to book a consult, just and that's completely free, but just a look-see in terms of, okay, what your needs may be, and whether I'd be able to provide some help with respect to that. So that's probably the best way. You can also see me on LinkedIn, and just look up my name, and then my profile will come up there as well.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for taking the time today, Ed. And for the audience listening or viewing, thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.
All right, take care.